Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, could Karl-Anthony Towns be the best scoring big man of all time? He's already the best shooting big man of all time. There really isn't much question about that. But now ESPN Zach Lowe is suggesting, could he become the best scoring big man of all time? I'll give you my thoughts on that and why I think it's completely feasible. Plus, Wolves Magic tonight, a peek at the standings and more. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm also the editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site on the Fansided Network. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend and happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves are in Orlando to take on the Magic tonight, in Miami to take on the Heat on Saturday night. It's a packed weekend. There's plenty to talk about on the show here today. First of all, though, thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere you listen to podcasts. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey. You can find it everywhere. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves or at Beecken is my account. That's with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right. We're going to get to Wolves Magic. The Timberwolves have not seen Orlando since I think it was October, actually, the end of October. So I want to get into that matchup a little bit later. We'll talk about the standings. There was actually a game that turned out in the Wolves' favor on Thursday night in the NBA. So we're going to get to all that here in a minute. But I want to start with Karl-Anthony Towns and also just a couple of fun in general Timberwolves statistics now that we're at the whatever we're at. I don't know, like the 80% mark of the schedule. So the Timberwolves as a team, we'll start there, and then we'll get into Cat. The Timberwolves as a team right now are sitting 7th in offensive rating, according to Basketball Reference. 7th. They've been top 10 now for a little while. Of course, earlier this season, they were in the bottom half of the league, and it was confounding because everybody knew that they had tons of offensive talent on this roster. But they've been in the top 10 now for the better part of the last few weeks. They're up to number 7 in offensive rating. And along with that, remember, the Wolves have been bottom 10 in three-point shooting percentage. They've been 1 or 2 in three-point rate, three-point attempts per game, basically all season. And they're still number 1 in three-point attempts. They're actually number 3 in three-point rate right now. But they're 14th in three-point percentage league-wide, 35.2%. Again, they've been like 17th or worse all season long. They just recently took a huge jump. And obviously shooting nights like the one they just had, really the last like 4 that they just had against Oklahoma City and Portland, I think one of those was bad. But other than that, they've been draining threes like crazy over the past week and a half. They're up to 14th, which is just insane, a crazy jump. They continue to improve their free throw rate. They now have a free throw rate that's 17th in the league. The turnovers have been a bit of an issue, or excuse me, free throw rate is 14th in the league. Turnovers have been a bit of an issue of late. They're 17th now in turnover rate. That have been much lower. But the offensive rebounding continues to be top 5 league-wide. So in all these factors that you're looking at, offensive rebounding, free throw rate, and three-point rate, they're number 1 in three-point rate, number 5 in offensive rebound rate, number 14 in free throw rate. They're number 14 in three-point percentage, number 14 in free throw rate, and number 17 in turnover percentage. So they're where they need to be in most of these areas. If they could just trim back a few of those turnovers, continue to be aggressive, get into the basket, this offense is going to continue to improve. And remember, for the past couple of weeks, the roster has not been fully available to Chris Finch. They're not the only team that's true for. But I mean, Anthony Edwards missed 4 consecutive games. D'Lo's missed 2 games in the past couple of weeks. Patrick Beverley's missed, I think, 3 games in the past couple of weeks. Vanderbilt missed the game on Wednesday. The Timberwolves swapped Edwards and D'Lo, who missed Monday's game. They were available Wednesday. Beverley and Vanderbilt sat out. So there's just been kind of this rotation of guys available, not available. And part of that's at this point by design. Guys are a little bit banged up. They're maybe not truly injured. They'd be playing if it were the playoffs. But it's better to give them a day against a team like Oklahoma City or Portland than it would be to cause them to play, aggravate the injury, or simply just not get the rest that they need. We'll see who all plays on Friday in Orlando and Saturday in Miami because, I mean, obviously there's always the chance that the Timberwolves choose to rest some guys on one side of the back-to-back and other guys on the other side of the back-to-back. We'll get into the actual injury report later. There's a bunch of guys listed as questionable, but we'll talk about that later when we discuss Wolves Magic. Now, though, I want to spend some time talking about Karl-Anthony Towns. So I've talked about it on this show a couple of different times now. First, I think way back in December when Towns made the comment, kind of the aside, that he's the greatest big man shooter of all time. And there was a little bit of tiff at the tiff's maybe not the right word. I mean, at the time, there were some people that laughed. Dirk Nowitzki made a comment on the Mavericks TV broadcast about it, like an aside. There were some people that made fun of it. Mavs fans were up in arms. And then I talked about it on the show. I wrote about it, Dunking with Wolves, and said, well, I mean, he's not wrong. Like, factually, he is a better shooter than Dirk Nowitzki ever was. I understand that Dirk was a trailblazer. I understand that Dirk was better in general as a player up until this point. Dirk's a Hall of Famer. Like, there's no questioning that. But if you're just talking about the best big man shooter, it's Karl-Anthony Towns. And since then, all he's done is continue to shoot over 40%, win the three-point shooting contest, which Dirk did once. It's not even really a conversation. It's a different conversation than who's the better player, right? That's just a different conversation, and one that we can revisit in a few years, because there's absolutely the chance that Towns becomes a better all-time player than Dirk. Sitting here right now, he's not. He's only been playing for 7 years. So, I mean, there's just, I don't know. It's not even really all that controversial in my mind. However, now, and it came back up again, I think, around the three-point contest. I talked about it a little bit on the show, but I want to bring it up again in a broader context of best scoring big man ever. And this is Zach Lowe at ESPN. This is an insider story over at ESPN. He does his 10 things every week. It's fantastic. He really kind of dives semi-deep on 10 different things from around the league. And it's always just kind of a smattering of things from everywhere. And this week, number 5 on his 10 things was Karl-Anthony Towns. And he backs up my claim that Towns is the best shooting big man of all time, and then furthers it by saying, could he actually be the best all-around scoring big man of all time? So I want to read a couple of quick excerpts from Zach's article and provide some of my own context and color to the best shooting big man, or the best scoring big man, conversation. So we're going to do that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at BetOnline. It's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season, and it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's talk more about Towns and Zach Lowe's article. First, though, a big thank you again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen. We genuinely appreciate it. For your next listen, you can check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. It's the best way to find out what happened in the NBA last night. There were only 2 games, of course, the TNT games on Thursday night, but every single day, even after like a busy Monday or Wednesday, the Locked On Now podcast will get you all caught up with 60 to 90 seconds from each host who knows exactly what's going on with their team and can give you more than just the box score, more than just the highlight shows. Be sure to listen to Locked On Now for all of that. Okay. So Zach Lowe's article, Zach, I'm just going to read what he says at first because I love it. This is an unbiased national reporter backing up what I've been saying about Karl-Anthony Towns. He says, it sounded audacious when Towns crowned himself as the parentheses future big man shooting king, but it's really not. He hits 50, 40, 80 marks like clockwork, and he's playing in an era of higher three-point volume than the only other candidate, Dirk Nowitzki. Just leave it there. So he adds future there because obviously he's still got plenty of time left in his career, and it's hard to. Towns called himself the current king. We could argue about that because it is true factually, but it's also he's going to add to it, right? 50, 40, 90 is not crazy. I mean, I don't think he's ever been above 84 or 85% from the free throw line, but it's not insane to think he could add a few points there either. And yes, I understand that the volume thing is really what makes this. But still, I mean, Dirk's 3-point percentages were worse on lower volume. And the argument can always be made. These guys, could Michael Jordan have been a better 3-point shooter if it was a bigger part of the game then? Yeah, probably. I mean, like there's certainly that argument, right? Obviously, Larry Bird would have shot a lot more threes than he did if it had been a bigger part of the NBA at that point. I get that. But we can't ignore the efficiency. Like, we can't punish Towns for the era he plays in, and for the efficiency he hits when he does shoot threes. I mean, it's on the one hand, yeah, he practices them more, I'm sure, and it's much more a part of the game, and there's more opportunity. But it's harder to hit a higher percentage of a higher volume, and he's doing that. His volume's down a little this year, but over the course of his career, it's obviously much higher than Dirk's. At any rate, Lowe goes on to ask whether Towns should aim higher. Could he become the most well-rounded scoring big ever? It's on the table depending on how you classify Kevin Durant and LeBron. Obviously, Durant being basically 7 feet, LeBron playing the power forward spot for significant chunks of his career is what Lowe's referencing. But then he goes on to say, quote, Towns is efficient from every spot in every manner, post-ups, spot-ups, drives, fast breaks, whatever. The implicit promise of Towns was that he would dial in on defense and on the glass when the Wolves provided a supporting cast worth his while. We're there. Logo, I don't want to read everything verbatim. He goes on to talk about how Towns, quote, exists in the highest plane of skill development, the inner sanctum where only the best practice skills within skills beyond the reach of everyone else, which is just a crazy, when you really think about it. And Timberwolves fans, like, as a whole, people that watch the Timberwolves every day, we get a little bit numb to just how talented Towns is. I mean, he's not a 7-footer, call him 6'10", whatever, however big he is. He's a big man. He's a center. The fact that he can do the things that he does, shoot threes at the clip that he does, but also face up and score off the dribble. I mean, Joel Embiid's the only guy that's in the same realm in terms of these skill sets, and his jumper is nowhere near as good as Karl-Anthony Towns. And now that Towns is driving as much or more as Joel Embiid, this is a real conversation. And Lowe does this without bringing up Embiid at all. He doesn't compare Towns to anybody, which is smart. Any current players, but he talks about now Towns averaging 11 drives per 100 possessions, just 3 more than last season, and double his overall career rate. He gives the example of a pump fake 3 and then drive and a stop and a dive floater to avoid a charge. We've seen Towns add that to his game. He used to commit those charges. He still often will pull off to the side and try and hit a running layup off the glass. And a lot of times that's where he gets his and one opportunities, and that's generally effective. But if he's in the middle of the floor, stopping and putting up a floater is just, as Lowe puts it, the word he uses is outrageous. It's 100% true. He's still very good in the post, especially when teams don't bring doubles. If teams are trying to hide their bigs on Jared Vanderbilt and put a 4 on Towns, Towns is generally still fast enough to beat them on the perimeter. If he just walks them down to the post, he can score over them in the post if you don't bring a double. And he's improved his passing to the point, if you bring a double, he's more likely than not going to make the correct read and the correct pass. Lowe goes on to talk about how soon can the Wolves win big, as he calls it. Is Russell really the third guy with Edwards and Towns, or do they need to use all their picks, which they have, to trade for that next piece? What do you do about the supporting cast? Obviously, Jaden McDaniels is still very young. And he notes, by the way, McDaniels is in the middle of what he calls an uneven season. I know it's very easy to get caught up into the stuff that McDaniels, the flashes he's showing on both ends of the floor. But if this is a win now team, Jaden McDaniels is not consistent enough on either end of the floor, especially offensively, to say like he is a big time supporting role player now. I would say he's still got a ceiling that's borderline star. And I'm not disputing that at all, but you need consistency in the playoffs for a team that's led by one true superstar in Towns, a couple of fringe stars in Edwards and D'Angelo Russell. The rest of the supporting cast, the Malik Beasleys, the Jaden McDaniels, the Taurean Princes, the Jared Vanderbilts, those guys have to bring it every night. McDaniels has started to show really since the first of the year some more of that consistency. But in the playoffs, I mean, he can't not show up in a playing game, right? You need Jaden McDaniels to play his defense that he can play, to put up, 13 and 5 on, 13 points, 5 rebounds, and knock down a couple of open threes. They need him to do that on a consistent basis. And we've seen peaks that are higher than that and valleys that are much, much lower. So Lowe's point is well taken. I mean, even if the Wolves, I think still the most likely scenario, we'll get into this actually here in a minute. I still think the most likely scenario is that the Wolves end in the 7th spot. They win one of the 2 playing games. Maybe they lose one, win one, or they win the first one. Great. And then they end up losing to Memphis or Golden State in the first round. I bet they probably force it to 5, maybe even 6 games. Certainly 5, probably at least 6 games. And then what? What happens next? And we'll have plenty of time to talk about this in the summer. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they win in the first round, obviously. But what's the next move? And Glenn Taylor said recently when he was on Darren Wolfson's Scoop podcast that this roster is going to look pretty similar next year because not that many guys are free agents. At this point, it's basically Torian Prince. Josh Okogie is going to be restricted. There's a handful of fringe guys but everybody else is locked up. The starting lineup, Beasley has his extension. Vanderbilt just got an extension. Beverly has his extension. Beasley still got a year plus the player option left. So we don't really know, where this thing is headed in terms of the roster and just how ready some of these other guys are. McDaniels, among others, are ready to step up in the playoffs. But Lowe's point here is that now Towns is holding up his end of the bargain, and sky's truly the limit for Karl-Anthony Towns in terms of his offensive game. He's holding up his end of the bargain on defense. He's starting to rebound the ball a little bit more even lately. What can the supporting cast do to support Towns and to support Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell? Can this team make a little bit of noise in the playoffs, or what kind of moves might happen this offseason? So all those things are kind of packed into that Zach Lowe article. Go check it out at ESPN.com. It is an insider story, but a really fun read. And Zach's his analysis is so good. Okay, what I want to do next is I want to quickly look at the standings, the upcoming schedule, give you my thoughts, and then a super quick preview of Wolves Magic on Friday night. So we're going to do all that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions. I mean, we're I don't know, almost 2.5 months into this thing now, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution though, because I really truly enjoy eating them. I have at least one every single day, sometimes two. And if you haven't tried the Puffs, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Built Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. That includes Puffs. Low-calorie, high-protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better, and a typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Not so with Built Bars. Go to Built.com. You can scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be absolutely blown away. High-protein, low-cal, high-fiber, low-carb. Most Built Bars have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate, cookies and cream, or I should say that was new in February, but there's still some available at Built.com. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it will be good for you. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, let's close the show by taking a quick look at the standings. So Western Conference standings right now. Timberwolves still sit 7th. They've been 7th for what seems like forever, since well before the All-Star break. We're probably 5-6 weeks they've been in 7th place. But the Nuggets lost on Thursday night to the Warriors. Timberwolves are now only 2 games back of the Nuggets. They're only 2.5 back of the Mavs for the 5th spot. They're now 3.5 up on the Clippers, who are in the 8th spot. 3.5 up on the Clippers. And believe this is crazy. The Timberwolves are 9 games up on the Lakers, who are in the 9th spot. They've been awful lately, and the Lakers are barely ahead of the Pelicans at this point. They're 9 games ahead of the Lakers, and they're only 7 games behind the Memphis Grizzlies, who are 2nd in the Western Conference. They are closer to number 2 than they are to number 9. So the Timberwolves, they're only a couple games away from clinching a spot in the play-in, unless the bottom entirely falls out. The Timberwolves are going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be in the play-in, I should say. And they're only 2 back from Denver in 6, 2.5 back from Dallas in 5. And also of note, the Timberwolves have a better point differential now than both Dallas and Denver. Obviously, point differential essentially is Pythagorean record, or that's how you would determine a Pythagorean record or expected record based on point differential. And now it's not by much. And so there's obviously some variance here. It either shows the Wolves have had a little bit of good luck to this point, or had a little bit of bad luck to this point, or that good luck is coming, right? But it's very close. The Wolves have a 3.1 point differential on average, and Mavs are 2.9, Nuggets are 2.8. But it shows you that Dallas, Denver, Minnesota are kind of in their own grouping. And I talked about this before. that Phoenix, Memphis, Golden State, Utah, that's your top 4 in some order, right? Very likely Utah 4th, and Phoenix 1, and then you figure out Memphis and Golden State. But that's your top tier. Dallas, Denver, and Minnesota are your next tier. And then there's a massive drop off before you get to Clippers, Lakers, Pelicans. Everything changes if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George come back. But at the moment, it's Dallas, Denver, Minnesota battling for 5th, 6th, and 7th. And Minnesota's only 2 back of Denver and 2.5 back of Dallas. So that's notable and important to look at. Real quickly, looking at the schedule upcoming, the Wolves have Orlando Friday, obviously a winnable game despite the Wolves' recent struggles, or I guess forever struggles, playing in Orlando for whatever reason. They get Miami on Saturday on a back-to-back. That'll be tough. But then San Antonio and the Lakers next week before you get the Murderers Row. Milwaukee, Dallas, Phoenix, Dallas, Boston, Toronto, Denver, Houston. Well, Houston's not bad. We'll stop it at Denver. So from March 19th to April 1st, it's all playoff teams. And depending on your thoughts of the Eastern Conference in Boston and Toronto, I mean, you're basically looking at all those games are against a team that's probably in the top 13 or 14 teams in the entire league. It's going to be a difficult stretch. Back before the season started, my prediction for the Wolves this year was that they'd win between 42 and 44 games, and they would finish in 8th or 9th of the Western Conference. I think that was an optimistic prediction. It was certainly more optimistic than what a lot of the national pundits and the projection models were saying, but not that out of line. And then at the All-Star break, I amended my prediction based on where the Wolves were to the high side of that, to 44 wins. So I had said 42 to 44. Then I latched on to 44 at the All-Star break. Sitting here right now, I got to go a little bit higher, and not because I think they're going to beat all these great teams upcoming all the time. I don't think they're going to have a crazy record during this Murderers Row of opponents, but because they've won the games they should win. They've beaten all the teams they're supposed to beat. They've won all these Oklahoma City and Portland games that frankly, I was expecting them to drop one here or there. I think we all were, if I can speak for everybody. But I have the Wolves now going 9-6 the rest of the way, starting tonight in Orlando, and finishing the season at 47-35, 47 wins. Their over-under, I think, was 36.5, and I absolutely took the over, and I thought they'd be 42 to the high side of 44. So 47, I mean, my prediction's not bad, but if they can win 47, I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen a Timberwolves team that could even sniff 50 wins, 2004 to be exact. And well, I guess the Butler year was in that neighborhood, but still, that's my prediction. 47 wins as of March 11th is my prediction for how the rest of this year shakes out. Okay, now a quick Wolves Magic preview. So we haven't seen the Magic since it was like the 6th game of the season. And going back and looking at that box score, this was an ugly game, and I'm starting to have flashbacks. The more this was okay. So you may remember the Wolves actually led this game going into the 4th quarter. The Magic came into the game 1-6. The Wolves were 3-2. This was a home game in Minnesota. The Wolves were up by what were they up by? They're up by 6 going into the 4th quarter, and then they gave up 43 points in the 4th to Orlando. They were outscored 43-19 in the 4th. And the Wolves were basically at full strength. Patrick Beverley didn't play, and that, we'll get to that in a second because that impacted the Wolves defense, obviously. But Karl-Anthony Towns had 23, 16, and 6, didn't foul out, didn't have foul trouble, only committed 2 turnovers. Anthony Edwards had 24 points, took him 22 shots to do it, wasn't ultra efficient. Lowe did not have a good game. This is a weird one. He had the best plus minus on the team, but he was, Cole Anthony got whatever he wanted for the Magic. And Lowe himself only had 3 points on 8 shots in this game and only played 17 minutes. No Patrick Beverley meant that Cole Anthony was able to score 31 points, make 6 threes, had 9 rebounds and 8 assists in this game. Cole Anthony was phenomenal. Franz Wagner was also huge, 28 points for Wagner, and Minnesota native Jalen Suggs, the rookie, had 15 points. This is right before he got hurt towards the beginning of the season. And this was really just a function of the Wolves couldn't hit threes. They shot 27% from 3. The defense fell apart in the 4th quarter. They didn't make their free throws. The Magic got 30 free throw attempts in this game. That's just a complete and utter collapse. Something we have not seen, knock on wood, the Wolves have in a very long time. I mean, I guess you could say the Raptors game right before the All-Star break, the Philly game, they just got beat by a really good team. But you could say the Raptors game, which, by the way, it's a good sign when I could pick out the games where they played terribly of late instead of the other way around. Usually it's like, oh, they had that really good game against Denver or whatever. Now it's the other way around. We're picking up the rare game where the Wolves don't play well. And then in regards to the Magic themselves, I said they shot 30 free throws against the Wolves back in October. The Magic are actually they're 26th in free throw rate this season. They're 27th in free throw attempts per game. They don't get to the free throw line very often. Now, obviously, the Wolves are still the league's worst team when it comes to foul rate defensively and opponents' free throw rate. So something's got to give here. Last time it was the Wolves couldn't help themselves and they fouled like crazy. And the Magic got to the line despite their, the lack of a propensity to get to the line, if you will. So what gives here? Can the Wolves just avoid a hack fest? Can they avoid getting into foul trouble? Can they make the Magic make shots from the outside? Orlando is middle of the pack in terms of 3-point attempts per game, but they're 28th in percentage. They just don't have a good offense. They're 29th in offensive rating. The Wolves just saw Oklahoma City twice. Oklahoma City's 30th. And Orlando's relatively healthy. I mean, of course, they've got a couple. Jonathan Isaac's been out all season. Bol's been out for a while. But Jalen Suggs is back. By the way, Minnesota native, not having a good rookie season. He's shooting 30-something% from the field, I think. 36.4% from the field, 22% from three. Still a good defender, but pretty miserable offensively for Suggs. But if the Wolves can at least make life difficult for Karl-Anthony, force him into tough three-pointers, he'll take 3-point shots, but he only shoots them at a 33% clip. The Wagner brothers are really the ones that I think could hurt the Wolves if they can get going. They're both very talented. And obviously, Franz is the one that's the starter and does a bit more damage, but they're both good players. And those are the types of players that it feels like that can play inside and outside a little bit, have length, that the Wolves can struggle with, have shown, there's a high likelihood that they struggle with players like that. Whereas I think as long as they've got, as long as you've got Patrick Beverley available, and we don't know, he's questionable, you should be able to slow down Karl-Anthony to some extent, which leads me to the injury report. All these guys are questionable. Anthony Edwards, Taurean Prince, Jared Vanderbilt, and actually, I'm sorry, I thought Patrick Beverley was on the list again. He's not on the injury list on Friday, so Pat Bev should be available. But Edwards, Prince, Jared Vanderbilt again, and then a new one is Jordan McLaughlin on the list for right groin tightness. Now, if Beverly's available, the Wolves, I'm sure, would be more likely to allow McLaughlin to take a game off if Beverly's certainly available. So we'll see. Of course, Prince has played in the last 2 games. Vanderbilt played on Monday, but not Wednesday. Edwards played Wednesday, but hadn't played the 4 games before that. So we'll see who else actually available, but those 4 players are all listed as questionable. The Magic are healthy besides the 2 guys with the long-term injuries. And again, if the Wolves can avoid fouling, if they can force the Magic into shooting a lot of threes, and then take care of business offensively themselves. One last note is the Magic are the league's worst offensive rebounding team. They don't grab offensive rebounds. The Wolves are still bottom 5 in defensive rebound percentage. This is a team, again, something's got to give. I said that backwards. Nothing has to give there. If the Wolves just play their game, they'll grab defensive rebounds and the Magic won't get offensive rebounds and the Wolves will win this game. So I said that analogy completely backwards. This is a good matchup for the Wolves in that regard. And I remember being surprised by how badly the Wolves played in that fourth quarter back in October, because this isn't a bad matchup for Minnesota overall. It's a team that wants to shoot high volume threes. It doesn't dominate down low. Towns should be able to own the paint entirely. Naz Reid should be able to own the paint entirely. And as long as they make life difficult for Karl-Anthony, they should be just fine. All right. That's all we have for you today. Of course, Wolves Magic tonight, Wolves Heat tomorrow. We'll be back on Monday with the Monday show, of course, Monday through Friday. Thank you again to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, anywhere you listen to shows. You can also listen on Twitter follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Thanks again for listening to Locked On Wolves, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. As a reminder, Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. And thanks again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen. You can make your second listen Locked On NBA. It's our Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.